Today, we're going to be previewing the New Orleans Saints for the 2025 season. Before we get into this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss more of these season previews. We still have plenty more to get through, but let's get into the Saints preview. So first, looking at their additions and losses, another team that made a head coaching change. They bring in Kellen Moore, who last year was the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously had a very successful season last year with Philly. And in New Orleans, it seems like he might be trying to do a lot more of quick throws, quick passes, RPOs type of stuff to sort of make it easy for the quarterback to get rid of the ball quickly and get in rhythm, which is good because this quarterback room isn't necessarily the best. He's also bringing in Brandon Staley as his defensive coordinator. Now, I know he had a bad track record as the head coach in LA, but I'm confident that he's just more fit to be a defensive coordinator than a head coach. So I do think that the Saints can keep that level of defense that they've had before. Because they've had good defenses, especially when Dennis Allen was their head coach, who's now, I think, a defensive coordinator with, I think, the Bears. Could be wrong there. So they've always had okay defenses, so I think bringing in Brandon Staley, they'll be able to maintain that. And then their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore is going to be the main guy there. I don't remember exactly who their offensive coordinator was, but Kellen Moore is going to do the main play calling anyway. Then looking at some of their other additions, the player additions they made, they bring in Tyler Shough. It's weird that that's how you pronounce it and not show, but it's Shough from Louisville. Oldest quarterback in the draft. I don't know if he's the oldest in the draft, but he's definitely the oldest out of the guys that got picked high and the oldest of the guys that have a good chance to start. I do think he will end up starting because they used a higher-ish pick on him. Not too familiar with Shough. He definitely is, due to that age and experience from college, probably one of the more pro-ready quarterbacks. So that might allow him for an early success in the NFL. And a higher floor than maybe some other guys. Like, he probably doesn't have as big of a ceiling or as much potential as, a guy like Cam Ward or maybe even a Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart or even Jalen Milroe. So that could be beneficial in the short term while they potentially either figure out if Shough's their guy or if they move on to a different quarterback in next year's draft. They bring in Brandon Cooks, who, despite being older, he still had a solid season last year for Dallas. He's obviously returning to New Orleans, where he played most of his career and was once a very good receiver. But again, still decent despite his older age. They bring in Kelvin Banks, the first-round pick from Texas. I liked him coming out of college. I think he was the third tackle taken after Membu and Campbell. They bring in Dylan Radunz, who's just going to be a sort of backup. Now, I think he's backing up Trevor Penning, who obviously we'll talk about him later, but I think Radunz is just a backup that they're bringing in. They get Godshaw, I think that's how you say it, Devon Godshaw. He's just an okay nose tackle, honestly nothing too special. Isaac Yiadom, he played for New Orleans for part of 22 and all of 2023, where he was slightly better than he was this most recent season. But honestly, nothing too special out of Isaac Yiadom. Not the best cover corner either last year. So we'll see if he can, play a little bit better than this year like he did in New Orleans before. But nothing special. I think he's going to be high on the depth chart. Quincy Riley, I really liked Quincy Riley out of Louisville. I hope he gets a lot of playing time. Because honestly, the only corner I trust, there's Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry. And Alontae Taylor, I don't even trust a ton. So I hope Quincy Riley gets some reps. And then Justin Reed last year was honestly a very good safety for Kansas City. Probably the best pickup they made in this offseason, or at least out of free agency, was Justin Reed. And it's good that they bring in Justin Reed because they lose Will Harris, who, he was solid in 13 games he played last year for New Orleans, but I think Justin Reed is a much needed upgrade at that safety position, especially considering how weak their cornerback room is. Derek Carr, obviously, the big loss for them in terms of the position, because the quarterback position. Derek Carr, I know it hadn't been the best end to his time in the NFL, I guess, because he did retire, but he definitely was the best quarterback out of any. He's definitely the better quarterback out of any of the guys they currently have, at least in my opinion. And in 10 starts last year, he was actually pretty good for the Saints, especially those first 2 weeks where they were blowing teams out. They lose Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who in 8 games with New Orleans, he was pretty good deep threat, the long ball guy, him and Shaheed. But you have the younger guy in Shaheed to do that, so you don't really need both of them. He was kind of better than Rashid Shaheed a little bit statistically, but I think it's smart to go with the youth of Shaheed. They lose Lucas Patrick and Ryan Ramczyk at the O-line position. I mean, Ryan Ramczyk actually retired. He was definitely their clear best guy, and their O-line definitely has not been the same, even close to the same, since Ryan Ramczyk left and has been injured recently, I'm pretty sure. And Lucas Patrick, honestly, was just an okay depth guy for them, nothing too special. Him and Radunz are probably going to play similar roles this year for the Saints. Or Radunz going to play a similar role than Patrick did last year. Then they lose Peyton Turner, edge rusher. He didn't start at all last year, but still played in games. He was still on the roster and played when he could. And when he did get opportunities, he played well, I thought. Willie Gay, honestly, did not play very well for New Orleans, so I think they're fine losing him. Because you still got Demario Davis and you still got Peyton Turner. Not Peyton Turner. Forgetting his name, but we'll get to him in the defense. Talk about the defense. And then the last loss that we didn't talk about is Paulson Adebo. This is probably the biggest loss that they had last year, or that they had. Very good for the Saints. So losing him to, I think, the Giants definitely is going to hurt their cornerback room, especially when you replace him with Yiadom and a rookie in Quincy Riley. So overall, not the biggest fan of the Saints offseason. I like the Kellen Moore hire. I like bringing in Justin Reed. I like the Kelvin Banks draft pick. And we'll honestly just see what we get out of Tyler Shough. But overall, not the biggest fan of the Saints offseason. And their team's just getting older in general. So I think it's just not going to be the best season for the Saints. They don't have a difficult schedule, though, so maybe they can squeak out some wins. But looking at their offense, last year they were tied for 24th in points scored. They had a pretty below-average passing offense and about an average run offense. And when looking at the team last year, that kind of makes sense. We obviously talked about Tyler Shough a little bit at the quarterback position, how I like the floor of him being an experienced, probably smart decision-making quarterback, but I don't know how far he's going to take them. I do think he's the best option out of Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener. They played a little bit last year, and they didn't do too much in the limited reps they had. Obviously, at running back, you have Alvin Kamara, consistent guy for them. He is getting up there in age. He is 29, but despite being 29, he still had 1,000 scrimmage yards and a good amount of touchdowns as well. So you still like what Alvin Kamara can bring. And I really like Kendre Miller. He hasn't got a ton of opportunities yet, being their third-round pick from 2 years ago. And entering so far in his first 2 years, he hasn't got a lot of opportunity because of Alvin Kamara. But I really like Kendre Miller, and I hope he starts to get more opportunity. And Devin Neal, I believe, out of Kansas. I don't mind him either. So I kind of like the running back room. And as I'm recording this video, they just picked up Cam Akers. So we'll see what that means. Then looking at their offensive line, I mean, it was pretty below average last year, and it's probably going to be pretty below average this year. Trevor Penning is probably a big story of this O-line. Very bad start to his career at tackle, but he has moved to guard. And it might have, honestly, the switch to guard might have helped his career. He played a lot better at guard than he had been at tackle, and now they can have Fuaga and Banks be their starting tackles, which you really like those two guys. Eric McCoy obviously has been one of the best players on the Saints' entire roster, especially on their O-line. Made the Pro Bowl last year. Cesar Ruiz, not the best guard. And then Fuaga actually had a very good rookie year, one of the better rookie tackles probably in the entirety of last season. They were 12th in sacks allowed, and they're bringing in 4 of their guys. But McCoy's really good. Penning's potentially turning a page. You like what you saw out of Fuaga. You had your first round pick, Kelvin Banks, and then Cesar Ruiz is just okay. But maybe Radunz and Will Clapp can take over for Cesar Ruiz's spot there in the starting guard position. Overall, I think it will be a slightly improved O-line than it was last year, but nothing crazy. Not good necessarily for a quarterback in Shough that many people aren't sure of. But maybe with Kellen Moore's offense and that quick passing game, they can get over some of their O-line deficiencies. Looking at the sort of skill receivers, pass catchers, first tight ends, number one guy, Juwan Johnson. He's been decent so far in his career, nothing crazy. You obviously know what you have in Taysom Hill, the gadget ability that he gives you to do sort of everything. As a tight end, he's not, spectacular, but just as a football player, he's really good. And then Foster Moreau, Moreau was actually pretty decent last year for the Saints. I think he should honestly start. I liked what I saw. He had one game, I think, where he had multiple touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken. But I actually really like Moreau to start over Juwan Johnson. And looking at the receivers, Chris Olave has dealt with some injuries, some concussions. He only played 8 games last year, but in those 8 games, he was still very good. Obviously, they're bringing Brandon Cooks back as just a veteran guy. But again, despite his older age, he still produced last year. And then Rashid Shaheed was also hurt. They were just banged up too, on top of not having as talented of a roster. But Rashid Shaheed was also injured, but he is still very good. Can give you that deep threat that we talked about that MVS gives you. But you just go with a little more youth with Rashid Shaheed and move on from MVS. And I like that decision to have Rashid be your number one slot and your number one sort of speed deep threat. And then guys like Bub Means and Kelvin Austin, they honestly didn't really get too many opportunities, as well as Cedric Wilson. But Bub Means, great name, by the way, Bub Means. Their 5th-round pick from last year, so maybe sort of being that 4th guy, he can get more opportunities and really show what he had in college that got him drafted in the 5th round. Some of the big free agents that they have this year, Taysom Hill's a free agent. I have a hard time feeling he's going to leave with the success he's had in New Orleans. Rashid Shaheed's a free agent, so this is a big year for him, being that clear deep threat guy in that slot position. And can he stay healthy as well? Foster Moreau's a free agent, and again, I'm a fan of Foster Moreau. I think he's the best pure tight end on the team. So I think they might stick with Juwan Johnson. I think they extended Juwan Johnson. And then Trevor Penning's in a contract year, and that's big for him because of the struggles he's had to start his career. But maybe year 2 at guard he can really pick it up and earn that second contract with the Saints. Before we talk about the defense and a little bit of the special teams, as always, make sure to leave a like if you're enjoying this video so far, and also make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more content. And if you want to you can turn the notification bell on so you're notified when new videos get posted. Now, looking at the defense for the Saints, as I mentioned before, a better unit than their offense. They were 19th in points allowed, and they've always been a relatively decent defense, bare minimum. But again, definitely getting older with a lot of players like Tyrann Mathieu, Demario Davis, Cam Jordan. But nonetheless, it can still be a decent unit. Last year they were pretty bad in pass defense and run defense. And looking at the D-line, you got Chase Young, who did not get one start last year, but overall he actually had a pretty decent year in terms of pressures and hurries. He got a decent amount of sacks as well. So maybe he's been all over the place ever since his really good start to his career, but I think he can have a decent year in New Orleans. It seems like he might take over for Cam Jordan's spot, the long-term veteran for the Saints. Then, of course, you have Davon Godchaux, who we talked about earlier. He's just an okay nose tackle, nothing special. Brian Bresee, sack-wise, he had a good year. He had 7.5 sacks. I don't know about any the advanced stats and pressures and hurries, how well he did last year. But he at least got to the quarterback, and sometimes that's enough in some cases. Cam Jordan, obviously, still a decent edge rusher despite being very up there in age. You still like what you can get from Cam Jordan here and there. Khalil Saunders, don't necessarily know how good of a player he is, but he had the interception return against the Chiefs, which was awesome. And then Carl Granderson, he's actually been very good for the Saints the last 2 years. I really like Carl Granderson. I'm a big fan of Carl Granderson. I think you could argue he might be the best pass rusher on this team. He's my favorite pass rusher on the team, at least. So I think Carl Granderson can continue to build on those last 2 years he's had. Looking at the linebackers, I mean, Demario Davis, despite being 35, he's still very good at his age that he's at. Who knows how much longer he's got at this level, but right now I think he's still a very good linebacker for you. And Pete Werner, who I was trying to remember the name earlier, not Peyton Turner, Pete Werner. He's still young, didn't have his best season last year. Had a decent start to his career, but not the best 2024 campaign out of Pete Werner, but he's still a very young player, still plenty of room to get better. And then a name I want to mention is Danny Stutzman, their 4th-round pick out of Oklahoma. Not the most athletic linebacker, but very good instincts, and I think that can get him a lot of reps in the NFL, especially with an aging Demario Davis, and I think him and Pete Werner are their long-term plans at linebacker. Don't know how great that is, but I like Danny Stutzman as a guy that can see the field early on in his career. But it's just an okay linebacker room outside of Demario Davis. A little bit of question marks maybe with Pete Werner or Danny Stutzman. And then lastly, looking at their secondary, Kool-Aid McKinstry was very solid his rookie year, made a lot of good plays. I like the trajectory he's on and the potential that he has, and I think he's clearly their best DB. Lante Taylor, he's a free agent this year. Last year was not his best, at least for like coverage-wise. Definitely was not his best year in that regard. But it's still a very good tackler for a corner, one of the better tackling corners probably in the league, I think. So if he can work on that coverage, him and Kool-Aid could be a very good, because he's only 22, or not 22, he was drafted in 2022, entering a contract year. So if he can get that extension, unlike Paulson Adebo, I think him and McKinstry could be a good duo. Tyrann Mathieu, another older player, as we mentioned before. Despite being on the older side, he still has been a very good player recently for the Saints. Ugo Amadi, he was decent. So was Jordan Howden last year. Howden was in his second season. So you like the youth and potential that he has there. I like Jonas Sanker, the Virginia safety. He's a bigger, rangier safety. And then, as I mentioned before, Justin Reid had a very good year last year with Kansas City. I like that pickup. And Yahya Dam hasn't been the most consistent production so far out of Yahya Dam. So I think the secondary is going to rely a lot on Reed, McKinstry, Taylor, and an old Mathieu. And I don't know how consistent that room will be with what we saw to Taylor in coverage last year, with Mathieu being on the older side. I think that the defense is going to rely a lot on its D-line to get their biggest production. So we'll see how good this defense can be. Again, I don't mind the Brandon Staley pickup as the defensive coordinator, even though the Chargers didn't have the best statistics defense-wise when he was the head coach. I just think he's just so much more fit to be a defensive coordinator than a head coach. I do think it was overall a good pickup and a good hire. I do think he has his work cut out for him, and I do think this could maybe be the worst Saints defensive season in a while because, again, they've been consistently a very good defense. So I don't know how they're going to be this year, but it'll be interesting to see their defense and how these older players can sort of potentially keep up, especially with Demario Davis, Mathieu, and Cam Jordan, the old guys all being free agents as well. Like, if they show their age, they could all be let go, and this could be a completely new defense next season. Quick look at their special teams. Hayball's a solid punter. Great name as well. Groupie, he was relatively accurate last year. Younger kicker. I mean, from 50-plus, he was 6 for 8, which honestly, that's pretty solid. And then Rashid Shaheed, good return man, very fast, obviously. Kendre Miller, I think, can offer you a good chunk in the return game as well. Now, looking at their schedule. It's not the most difficult schedule in the world. According to opponent win percentage from last year, it's the second easiest schedule. However, because of the talent on the team, their over-under is only 4.5 wins. And I don't know if they're going to be able to reach it. I think they can win a division game. And I think they could either beat a team like the Titans, maybe the Jets, maybe another division game. But I don't see a lot of easy wins or even remotely games that have a chance at wins, honestly, for the Saints. So my floor for them is only at 2-15. If everything goes badly for the Saints this season, I can see them winning about 2 to 3 games as their bare minimum. Now, if things do go very well for them, they could maybe beat a team like the Cardinals, maybe beat a team like the Giants or the Patriots, or maybe get 2 or 3 division games. So maybe if everything goes well, Tyler Shough plays great for the more experienced rookie quarterback that he is. The age doesn't factor in. Kellen Moore hire is great. The O-line builds on something it showed last year. Maybe they could get around 7 wins as their absolute most and their absolute ceiling. I don't know if that's going to be very likely, so my prediction will either be 4 or 5 wins for the Saints. I am going to lead on the lower side and have them finishing at 4-13 and not reaching their over. I just don't think it's going to be a very good season for the Saints. They don't have a lot of talent. Their talent that they do have is aging, and they got new coaching staffs. We'll see how that works out. The schedule is pretty easy, but they still have some hard teams in there, so I don't know how successful of a season it will be for the Saints. And they might end up picking another quarterback next year to really start this new era of the Saints, because they've yet to really get that quarterback since Drew Brees left. But with that being said, that will conclude our preview for the 2025 New Orleans Saints season. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. Comment down below your thoughts on the Saints' upcoming season. And please hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss more content. It helps a lot when you hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.